the Pioneer podcast from the Engineering and Physical Sciences Research Council, presented by Jane Reck.
Welcome to the very first edition of the Pioneer podcast, highlighting UK research in engineering and the physical sciences. Coming up, how work in landmine detection has helped develop a new technique for breast cancer screening.
My mother-in-law, I know, has had a mammogram, and from what I've heard about it, it's not an experience I'd like to go through myself. So for this new machine to come out, I think it will make people more willing to go and have it done.
And how e-science is being harnessed to help our buses run on time and provide better treatment for chronically ill patients.
It's basically the sharing of data, the sharing of programs, the e-science technology is all driving to bring that together as a whole and deliver much better science in a much shorter amount of time.
But first, ultimately, research is all about making our lives better. So what does the future hold in healthcare and building design? Will we be able to meet our energy needs? And how will we work and spend our social time in years to come? EPSRC is holding a major event in March to highlight the work it's supporting in all of these areas and more. Called Pioneers 09, it also aims to help connect business with research to help the process of turning current ideas and projects into the products and services of the future. We'll be hearing more about some of the research being featured shortly. But first, some of the exhibitors explain why they feel this type of activity is so important in helping to get their research onto the next level of development.
While kind of fundamental research is really important, getting an understanding of people and developing new theory and methods, what we feel is crucial in research is application, particularly in products that can change habits in industry, where it can change people's lives through the products they buy and the environments they live in.
Well, I think it is important that EPSRC showcases this because much of the science and technology that's developed out of EPSRC projects is sort of seen within the EPSRC community, but the wider benefits and the innovation that comes out of that maybe are not disseminated widely outside of that. It's important to see that research turns into products. It helps develop the UK economy through the innovation, which is something that the UK is very well regarded for.
Anyone who doesn't want to display their research is actually short-selling the taxpayer. It's part of your responsibility as a researcher, and frankly it's also the most fun part of it.
For us, this is an exciting opportunity to meet people from industry, to promote our work and to get it out there and hopefully make future partnerships to further develop this research.
So how will the researchers taking part in the exhibition be making our lives better in the future? And what will be on show at the event?
The aim of our work is very much one of trying to enable people with dementia to stay in their own homes for as long as possible. And in order to do that, the technology is being researched in such a way that it kind of emulates what a living carer would do. So we're looking at the ways that carers interact with the person they're looking after, the kind of support that they provide, and seeing if the ways in which that support can be emulated by technology.
Primarily, my work involves trying to bring different types of images together. So, for example, X-ray images can't show soft tissue information. They cannot show a picture of the lungs or the heart or the liver. They generally can show broad differences, such as differences between bone and soft tissue. So we can use modalities such as CT or MRI, which can highlight these soft tissue structures and fuse them with the X-ray picture. So we're bringing two different types of information together. It's really the advances in the computer technology which make it now usable in the clinic, as opposed to just being something that we would do in a research lab.
We started with BKCC, Building Knowledge for a Changing Climate, and those 9 projects are pretty much now finished. Some of them are still ongoing, so we'd like to show some of the results from those projects. So they were looking at obviously the impact of climate change on say the built environment, on urban drainage, the urban environment itself, electricity supplies, air transport, those sorts of things. So we'd like to show some of the results from those projects, hopefully through a series of interactive tools where people that come along will be able to play around with the tools and software that were developed during these projects.
We'd like to communicate with people of influence that research into music is actually worthwhile and important. Because music touches everybody's lives, no matter what age they are, it tends to get associated with, number one, trivia, and number two, obviousness, and in fact there's an awful lot of research to be done. And in many senses, music is one of the leading aspects of the digital economy, because all the problems that now video is seeing with video sharing, music saw 5 and more years ago. So because music penetrates so many people's lives, it's actually an exemplar for a lot of other things.
I'm a designer. We're working alongside clinicians, ergonomists, social scientists, and business and management specialists. So the work that we're involved in is currently researching, understanding and mapping out really what happens currently within the emergency services, how ambulances are dispatched, how we can improve the equipment and vehicles used by people that are treating in the community so that more treatment can take place on scene, so in somebody's front room or at the side of the road, rather than taking people to A&E.
We're looking to see how design can help and support and maintain independence at home in later life. We identified the bathroom as probably the one key area where you lose your dignity and you lose your independence. We need to take on board the needs of older people, but look at how it can improve quality of life for everybody.
We're building up new technologies for new sensors in the mobile environment so we can measure much more pervasively, almost putting a sensor on every lamppost, putting them on buses and allow people to carry them around so we can build up in real time a real picture of the traffic pollution as it builds up, understand it better and use it to manage traffic and provide feedback on health effects of pollution.
I'm a thrill engineer developing technology to do with physiological monitoring of riders at theme parks or undergoing any kind of thrilling or extreme experience. I created a whole format called Thrill Laboratory, which was the idea of bringing together artists, designers, scientists. I suppose I'm a bit of an impresario, a kind of showman. I bring together all these different facets of people who have an interest in thrill. The early incarnations of this thrill monitoring equipment, I think we called it Thrill Technology Mark 1, is something I developed with scientists from Media Lab Europe. And I saw the potential in a device that they were creating to help children with attention deficit, so overexcited children. They created a game called Relax to Win, which basically helps train young children, so go from a high level of stress and anxiety to this sort of lower level, and basically by reaching this sort of calmer level they would actually win the game. So I'm playing in the same field as, I suppose, as therapists, people who are dealing with sort of clinical depression and all sorts of different areas that may use sort of physiological monitoring to get to the core of people's emotional states.
For more information on Pioneers 09, visit pioneers.epsrc.ac.uk.
EPSRC, improving quality of life through excellence in research.
The conventional mammogram is a pretty undignified and uncomfortable experience for the thousands of women each year who are screened for breast cancer. But now a team of EPSRC-funded researchers at the University of Bristol are working on a project that could revolutionise the screening process. Cherry Lewis from Bristol told James Harrison that her experience of the conventional mammogram is something she would rather not have to repeat.
I had breast cancer about 12 years ago, and although I was very lucky and caught it very early and just had to have a lumpectomy, obviously then I had to find out if it had all worked, and I still was clear. And so about every 3 months I had to have a mammogram. And while it wasn't exactly something I suppose I dreaded, I knew that it was something I wasn't really going to enjoy. They have to squash your breast down into a very small space. It's not a pleasant experience. It's something that I know I have to go through for the benefit of my health, but it's not something I would choose to. So I just wish I'd been able to have this new experience.
Breast cancer is, of course, one of the commonest killers of women. It is one of the commonest malignancy in women, and we do have good techniques which have been introduced since 1998, where you have the mammography clinics, and they detect about 16,000 cancers a year. Because they're detected slightly earlier, they reckon that saves about 1,000 lives a year. So there's obviously a particularly important need to have a technique which you can use to detect cancer.
Alan Preece, a retired professor of medical physics, is a member of the Bristol University team that's been looking at improving rates of breast cancer detection, especially in younger women for which conventional mammography isn't possible. A combination of medical physics and electrical engineering has produced a new device that aims to combat the problem. And the origins of the new technique came from a seemingly unlikely area of research undertaken by Dr. Ian Craddock from the university's electrical engineering department.
I was running a project at the university on landmine detection that involved a similar detection problem, looking for small objects. And so it was a very similar sort of detection problem. I was also aware of the work that Alan Preece was doing in medical physics at the time, and the fact that tumours, like landmines, differ somewhat from their surroundings, and that enables you, in principle, to be able to detect them.
My contribution is understanding the medical problem and actually how to apply it, how to get the ethics approval, how to put together a project that would stand up to scrutiny from an ethics committee when you're dealing with patients. Engineers would take a long time to get to grips with this. So a clinical scientist, which is what I was employed as, is ideally placed to actually work with patients, to interface with the clinicians who've got the real problem, and to try and apply it.
This combination of research has produced a new machine which is already delivering encouraging results. During the last few months, the design has been steadily improved, so that detection is now increasingly more accurate.
The device consists of a hemispherical arrangement of little square antennas that fits around the breast. The woman lies down essentially onto a couch, and her breast falls into that cup. It's basically a radar system, so exactly the same technology as you would find being used for air traffic control at an airport. But obviously, rather looking for big moving aircraft, it's looking for tumours within the breast.
The fact the device is very much more comfortable is down to the way the research team worked with female volunteers. Paula Anstey has been helping the scientists perfect the machine's design.
You're with a female nurse. She helps you get onto the bed, you're face down. She puts a towel over you, and a cup sort of raises up from under the bed and just sits around your breast and turns. You can't feel anything, you can just hear a clicking, but there's no pain, there's no movement, it doesn't catch your skin or anything. You really don't know what's happening.
Alan Preece hopes the new system will mean more women like Paula can be scanned for signs of breast cancer, and hopes eventually its usage will not just be in hospitals, but in shopping malls and occupational health centres.
Since it produces inherently a three-dimensional image, it might also be useful for biopsies, for getting the geometry of the breast much better than you can with squashing it and trying to see where the lesions are. And it also, I think, would be very likely, because it'll be much cheaper, would be something that could go to the third world and be used extensively. It doesn't need a skilled person to use it. All the image and the clever part is in the software that a non-clinician can understand very easily.
The project's success so far is down to a combination of working in partnership and accessing dependable sources of funding. EPSRC has made a real difference to the research programme after awarding the team a significant grant.
The EPSRC, to a large extent, kicked it off with the very expensive bit that we needed, which was a vector network analyzer. And yes, we do need funding to go on, and that's why we're undertaking the trial, because we're hoping we get some good results that would attract further funding.
Ultimately, this piece of research is about saving lives. While 70% of eligible women currently take up mammographies, this new three-dimensional low-impact imaging system could reach out to many more women of all ages. As Paula Anstey suggests, anything that encourages women to receive proper breast cancer screening can only be a good thing.
My mother-in-law, I know, has had a mammogram, and from what I've heard about it, it's not an experience I'd like to go through myself. So for this new machine to come out, I think it will make people more willing to go and have it done and not worry about the experience, because I know my mother-in-law was quite concerned during the build-up to go in. She knew it was painful, she knew it was uncomfortable, and she just didn't look forward to it at all, whereas this, you haven't got any of those worries.
Paula Anstey, ending that report from the University of Bristol by James Harrison.
The Pioneer Podcast from EPSRC.
Attention please, this is a platform observation.
We've all been there, waiting at an airport, bus or train station, hoping that our service hasn't been delayed or cancelled. Well, helping buses, trains and aircraft to run on time is all in a day's work for Professor Jim Austin at the University of York. The same work will also provide faster, better treatment for chronically ill patients. With EPSRC funding, Jim has led a team of researchers who've developed a totally new way of searching for and analysing information to directly solve or prevent everyday problems. The work harnesses the power of e-science, which enables scientists using computers to work with each other from different locations anywhere in the world in real time. They're also able to work together much more efficiently than in the past, as Jim explains.
It's basically the sharing of data, the sharing of programs, and the community working together as a whole in a very cohesive way, and the e-science technology is all driving to bring that together as a whole and deliver much better science in a much shorter amount of time.
I'll elaborate on how the work came to be used in areas like public transport and healthcare shortly, but first Jim outlines how it all began with the help of Rolls-Royce.
Well, the work started in about 2002 in terms of work on e-science and grids with the DAME project, which was an e-science pilot project. Basically, this is in partnership with Rolls-Royce to develop a distributed aircraft maintenance environment, that's what DAME stands for, which is basically a technology that uses grid methods to access data and services remotely that allow you to do prediction operations on aircraft engines. Prior to DAME and basically e-science, people could collect data off the engines, but the problem was actually delivering that to users in such a way that they were able to examine that data and run processes on the data that allowed them to do prognostics, diagnostics in a more timely fashion. So the technology allows them to not only remotely access the data but also search large databases and other examples of other events going on other engines around the world where the diagnostics has already been shown to be true. So they could actually link with that, and then for the engine they're looking at, particularly where this event has occurred, a bird strike or whatever, they'll be able to say and confirm, yes, that is definitely a bird strike. It was a challenge to actually show that this could be achieved on the large data sets, because these data sets are in terabytes of size. So the distribution, the collecting of that data, the analysis, all had to be tied together.
So an essential part of the way the project works is to do with matching patterns to solve problems in a much faster, more efficient way than has been done previously. A variety of areas are already benefiting, from healthcare to transport.
For us, the major thrust of novelty has been distributed search. This is linked with the science grid-based technology. Basically what this means is that instead of bringing all your data to one place, you can leave the data where it is. So you might have 5 sites with the data, and you can do search at the remote sites and bring that forward. So we already had the search technology that allowed this, but what we did within the project was to deliver that through e-science and grid technologies. The search technology combined with the distributed capability is totally novel and unique. people tend to think, oh, I've got to take the data together and do my analysis. No, what you really want to do is collect the knowledge together. So go out and ask the questions, bring those answers back, which is a nice small piece of data, which is nice and quick, and do it much more effectively and efficiently. In the buses example, what the system is aimed to do is to measure the signal data from the loops in the road to look at the traffic progression down the road, identify particular problems looking at that signal data, and then alter the phasing of the traffic lights to overcome the problem. So it's a collection of data. You've got remote data out there, you've got particular patterns that you want to search for, and when those patterns occur, you've got a blockage or whatever, you change the phasing of the lights, and so you can improve the flow of the buses. Another example is the analysis of renal function. One of the problems that people have is obviously quite possibly that their kidneys can fail to operate correctly. So what we're interested in doing is to look at the data that comes from the measurements that the consultants take from the kidney function. These are not only flow rates and so on, but they're also the person's overall temperature, their blood pressures, etc. These are all signals that are collected. And what the specialist wants to do is to identify just when the failure might occur, so look for those precursors, which again patterns in that data, but also to link that through to the drugs that they're giving them. So there's a correlation between the drugs and the effectiveness of those drugs on the kidney function. And those two things, again, are a matter of collecting data. Now, one of the things within healthcare which is particularly of interest is where you have a lot of centres collecting a lot of data on a lot of different patients. And one of the great benefits of this distributed search technology is to allow you to identify, you've got a patient in front of you, they've got a particular condition, they've got a particular set of signals that you're looking at that are a bit odd, and the hope is that we're able to search other repositories across the nation of other patients and identify similar patients that had potentially a problem. So you can bring that back and say, oh look, there's a patient over there that has similar case to you, what happened in their situation, and really to verify what you're trying to do and validate the diagnosis.
A company called Cybula has been set up, and software has been developed called Signal Data Explorer, SDE.
There are two things happening. One, we're building more strategic relationships through the company, so we're pushing back the technology obviously through to commercialization, and we're forming more strategic relationships with customers, not only in the aircraft industry but also in other transport sectors, because there's an easy transfer of knowledge from one sector to the other. That's one thing we're doing. The other side of things is we're launching SDE as a out-of-the-box product. We're distributing that, we're supporting it, we're doing all the manuals, we're making sure all the websites are right and all that sort of thing. That's going on right at the moment. So basically it's an exciting time. We've got the product generation and we've got our strategic relationships being developed.
Jim Austin from the University of York. Well, that's it for this, the first Pioneer podcast from EPSRC. Thanks for listening, and we'll have our next edition out in 3 months' time.
You've been listening to the Pioneer podcast from the Engineering and Physical Sciences Research Council. Our Pioneer publication is available online at www.epsrc.ac.uk, or you can have a copy sent to you by emailing your details to pioneer@epsrc.ac.uk.